So last week, for those who weren't with us, we were looking at the parable of the two trees, Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 20. So if you guys have your Bibles, I invite you to turn there with us because we are going to pick up where we left off last time. Um, Before we get into part two, I'd like to just kind of ask those people who were here last time what we covered so far and what we learned from last time for the little that we did cover. I think we just covered like 3 or 4 verses. Okay. So anyone willing to share what comes to mind, what was still, remembered from last week?
We discussed false prophets and the good and bad fruits.
That's right. So the context of which Jesus gives this parable is because he gives the warning in verse 15, beware of false prophets. And then, which comes in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravening wolves. We delved into that. And then Jesus goes into this illustration, if you will, of two trees and the types of fruit they bring forth. Okay, good. So we talked about that last time. Any other thoughts? Anyone else want to chime in? This is like asking people after they come back from church, what did the preacher preach about today? It's
We
like,
talked about the trees, the two different types of trees.
uh-huh.
One produces evil fruit and the other one produces good fruit.
Okay. So what kind of tree brings forth good fruit? Because Verda, you were saying there's two trees, one brings forth good fruit, one brings forth bad fruit. So my question is, since you said trees that bring forth this fruit, what kind of tree brings forth good fruit?
Good tree.
A good tree. And what kind of tree brings forth bad or evil fruit?
A corrupt tree.
A corrupt tree. Very good. Using the word from the text. Very good. Okay, so there was this contrast, right? That Jesus puts between a good tree that brings forth good fruit, corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit. Okay, we kind of talked about what evil fruit is and the definition between these two trees. We also talked about there was a principle, right? There's a principle that Jesus was bringing out. What principle was that?
How you can tell the good tree from the evil tree.
Okay, how can you tell the difference between the good and the evil?
The good
What?
the good tree will only bear good fruit.
Yes,
Will only bear evil fruit.
that's right. So that's the principle found in verse 17, where Jesus says that every good tree, not some good trees, not few good trees, not 90% of good trees, but it says every good tree brings forth
Good.
good
fruit.
Right?
Mhm.
Corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit, or we looked at the word evil. Evil means bad, or it means diseased fruit, right? So this is a principle. So in other words, a good tree can never produce evil fruit, and a corrupt tree can never produce good fruit, right? This is the set principle. Okay, so this is the contrast that Jesus puts out. He describes the false prophets that he warns about at the beginning as having no fruit, right? Because like he compares them as thorns and thistles. Thorns and thistles never produce fruit. Okay. Now here Jesus describes them as the false prophets as having fruits, but they have evil fruit, right? So false prophets can be categorized in two categories. based on what Jesus is saying here. If you look at it carefully, you will not notice this if you just do a surface reading of this. But if you delve into this, Jesus puts false prophets in one of two categories. One, there are false prophets that are without fruit. They have no fruit. There's an absence of fruit, right? The other is that false prophets, have fruit, yes, but they are evil fruit, right? So
Yeah.
some of them have no fruit, some of them have, or they bear evil fruit, right? And I asked last week, which one's worse, do you think? Prophets that have no fruit or prophets that have evil fruit? And I just gave my opinion. You guys can argue with me if you want, but I thought that having no fruit, what did I say last time? Does anyone remember?
Well, my husband gave me a way to understand it better for me was,
Okay.
let's say you have a soda and poison.
Mm-hmm.
If you know the poison's bad, you're not going to drink it.
Right.
'Cause there could be poison in the soda, but you don't necessarily know it's there.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you might drink it. So
Yeah.
one's obvious, the other one's a deception.
Right. So yeah, so one is obvious and one is,
I
deception.
was
So
gonna say, like, in the terms of fruit, the one with no fruit, if you have a choice between an empty bowl and a bowl of poisonous fruit,
Mhm.
you're just gonna go with the empty bowl because the poisonous fruit's gonna kill you. Whereas
Right.
if you don't eat any fruit at all, at least you don't die.
Right. So you know what? Both of them are bad, right? That's what we can conclude. They're both bad, in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them could be overtly bad, you could see it. Others, you cannot detect it, and that's dangerous too, right? So, so verse 18, it says, a good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, right? Neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. This is the principle that was set in place in verse 17, right? So Jesus is saying that it's impossible. It's impossible for a good tree to produce evil fruit. It's impossible for a corrupt tree to bring forth good fruit. And I use an illustration like, just like an apple tree does not yield oranges, right? An orange tree does not yield pineapples, right? And that's very clear. That's a set principle. An apple tree will always produce apples, right? So does anyone remember the homework I gave last week?
Find texts that speak about that.
Yeah, find texts that talk about something that seems good but is actually bad, just like the fruit. Like, this contrary principle in verse 18, a good tree bringing forth evil fruit. Do we have an example of that? Do we have a corrupt tree bringing forth good fruit? Do we have an example of that in the Bible? And I asked you guys to come up with do some searching and see if you could come up with something that can be shared that illustrates this contrary principle that Jesus says cannot be. Verse 18, cannot be. Good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. Corrupt tree cannot bring forth good fruit. Where in the Bible do we see similar sort of thing being brought out here? Anyone?
Well, I found a verse and
Okay.
I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but it's James 3, verse 17 and 18.
Okay.
It says, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace in them that make peace.
That is very spot on, because it's talking about fruit, right? But I would have liked to go earlier than that. Verse
Right.
12, actually verse 10. Okay. Verse 10, James 3 verse 10. Check this out, guys. If you're not looking at it, I encourage you to look at this. Okay, it says, out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and what? Cursing. So in other words, out of the same mouth, two things proceed out of that mouth. Blessing and cursing. Is blessing and cursing opposites or the same thing?
Yes.
They're opposites, right? So in other words, here's a mouth that speaks blessing, but also speaks cursing, right? My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water
Mm,
and bitter?
mm.
How would you like that? How would you like to have that? You dig a well, you put a faucet in, and every time you turn the faucet, you get 50-50 chance of getting fresh water. You turn on the tap and you're like drinking, oh man, it's salty. And then like you turn it on like another time, it's like fresh. How would you guys like that?
No, we wouldn't.
You wouldn't like that? A little of both? No? So that's not good, right? That's not the expectation. Verse 12, can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries? That's kind of like what I just said earlier. Apples cannot bear oranges. Oranges cannot bear pineapples. Here, fig trees cannot bear olive berries. Neither a vine figs. So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. So what is James saying here? In what
You
case?
can't be good and evil. You can't
Yeah.
be both good and and evil. You can't be of the world and of heaven.
Right. You cannot be both. You're either one or the other. And what determines that in this case? What you say. Right?
What?
What you say.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, what you say determines
Oh,
that, right? So you either speak blessing or cursing, you speak sweet words or bitter words, right? And there is, what is it? It's called an oxymoron or a paradox. You know, a paradox, something that shouldn't, it does not fit. It's like two contradictory things happening at the same time, right? Which doesn't make sense, right? And in this, as it is in the physical, so is it in the spiritual, right? There's nobody that can truly be a spiritual person if they do both of these things, right? Because you may act like you're holy and pious, but in actuality, who you really are is very apparent underneath the surface, right? And so this is how it's interesting when you delve into other texts. It gives you a greater depth of what Jesus is saying here in this parable. Do you see it?
Hey,
Yes.
I wanted to say one thing. When we were talking about how you could tell, and we were saying you couldn't tell, in Mark 11:12-14, that is when Jesus was stand afar off and the fig tree had leaves.
Mhm.
But when he got up, he you know, he had it. He killed the tree, and the disciples were surprised.
Yeah.
We were talking a minute ago. That's what, when I was looking up something, I thought when we were talking a minute ago about whether it's, she said, you know, this thing is poison, so you don't go into it. But
Mhm.
Jesus was afar off from that tree. He went to
Mhm.
that tree to see. So
Mhm.
that sometimes I think where we would get confused of, do we go see these people that are wrong, or do we not? What, you know, in this parable, how would you?
Well, the Bible says test all spirits, right? But you should be careful, because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus even says that when they say, "Lo, here he is,
Go not
false
there.
Christ in the in the chambers or he's in the desert, he says, do not go,
Right.
right? Do not go.
I
It-
just, we're trying to figure out which prophet would you believe, the one that's telling you wrong, or would you believe the one you'd have to check on? That was just what you were talking about a few minutes ago when she said her husband explained.
Okay. Now, when you're saying that Jesus went to the fig tree to check the fig tree, you know, and you're using that as a application to should we seek out these false teachers?
No, I'm saying how you could, I'm not saying how, whether you seek them out or not, but sometimes when you're somewhere, you have to look at it to see if it's false. You can't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's the thing. That's the thing. The two things that Jesus talks about, like either they have no fruit or they have fruit, but it's evil fruit, right?
Okay.
And so the question is that if they have no fruit, right, that's bad. So you know that they're bad.
Right.
Okay. If they have evil fruit, that's a little, you know, you got to determine whether or not that fruit's evil or not. How do you determine that? One of the things is actually seen. It's kind of based on what Debbie mentioned in James chapter 3. It's very closely associated to that. But check out another reference. Maybe this will help expand this concept and idea even more. Matthew chapter 12, verse 33 to 37. This is the words of John the Baptist. Okay. John the Baptist that was beheaded. This is when he was, this is his words. Okay. Now listen to what he says here. Can someone read this? Matthew 12, 33 through 37.
Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For a tree is known by its fruit.
Okay,
Brood,
yes, continue.
okay. Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Mm,
A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things, and an evil man of the evil treasure brings forth evil things. But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. For by
okay.
your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
Words of John the Baptist. Question, first of all, when was John the Baptist saying this? Anyone? When does he say this? And who is he speaking to?
Wait a minute.
Huh?
You speak.
Wasn't that Jesus saying it? Because
Jesus is speaking, not John the
Oh,
Baptist.
Jesus is speaking. I'm sorry, this is a different one. But I'm getting it confused with Matthew chapter 3, where John says the same thing. Okay, this is Jesus. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for checking me. That's why we check each other. Okay, so why is Jesus saying this? In what context? Who's he saying this to?
to the Pharisees?
Okay, is that a question or are you sure? Vic?
I would say yes.
Well, in
Okay.
verse 24, it says, now when the Pharisees, so he was talking to the Pharisees.
Very good, Sharon, confirming who he is speaking to exactly. So Jesus is actually saying this. He's expanding what he said in the parable of the tree, good tree, bad tree. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and he's speaking to the Pharisees. Are Pharisees false prophets?
Yes.
In a way, you could say that, right? But what he brings out here, right, is again, what is the fruit? Okay, he says, by the fruits you'll know them. According to Matthew chapter 12, 34 to 37, what is the fruit?
It's what they're speaking, what's coming out of their
Their
heart.
words.
Ex- What's coming out of their heart is can you read somebody's heart?
No,
No.
No. So how do you know that it's coming from their heart?
By their words or actions.
By their words or actions. So in other words, according to this,
Yes.
the fruit, the identifiable fruit is what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that
Oh,
is yes.
and then the people who speak the words, good words, but actions don't justify it, is the bad fruit.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Very good, Vic. You're thinking. You're connecting it all. Very good. Okay. Very good. Now, you see. Aha, that's what I was talking about. Matthew chapter 3, verse 7. Matthew 3, verse 7 through, oh man, it's good. 7 through 10. Okay, now before we read Matthew chapter 3, verse 7 through 10, I just want you to, I want to say something important here, from Matthew 12, 33, 37. Something I want to say here about the fruit. The fruit here we learned are what? That Jesus talked
Bad.
about. They are
Bad
here is words,
words. Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So based on what Jesus is saying here, right? He's saying two things that we need to keep in mind. Okay. Number one, he wants us to remember that you may know what kind of tree they are by their fruits. What are their fruits?
The
Their
word.
words. So in
Words
other words, you can tell what kind of tree they are by what they speak. Okay, that's number one. Number two is there are so some, like we talked about, the fruits that are visibly identifiable and those who are not, right? So it's visibly identifiable when you see what they're saying, hear what they're saying, right? That's clear, identifiable. But what does he say here in verse 36? But I say unto you that every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. What does that tell you? That tells you that there may be words that you cannot hear them say, these false teachers or false prophets say, but you will only find out when?
at the judgment.
At the judgment, exactly. So, some things are overtly apparent, right? You can clearly identify it. Other times you can't until the judgment, right? So that's something that is very interesting that Jesus is bringing out here. There are going to be some people that will continue to do their evil ways, putting on a front of goodness as a facade, and they'll be very prosperous in that. And nobody will know. None will be the wiser about who they really are, right? They have everyone fooled, even the elect. But only those who, only till the judgment will God bring those things to light. God will expose those people and for what they've said, right?
Right, that's the first time I've heard it in that context. If you're an old Adventist, they used to tell you when you were joking around
Mhm.
all your things you said, and it kept you from making jokes and saying things. You're going to have to answer for these words, but it's good to know that it's speaking of someone doing something that's wrong, and then those words will come out where they'll be shown in the last days, rather than people just, we chit chat idly anyway. But to know this is speaking of the bad fruit speaking, that's
Mhm.
better context, I think.
Yes. And does it apply to what you said earlier, how it was applied before? Yes, it applies to that too. But this is actually giving a more broader context of that. Yeah. Which also very much applies. Right? Yeah. Okay. Good. So, before we go to Matthew chapter 3, I'm sorry. There's so much things here that I want to unpack. So Jesus says, good does not come from evil, and evil does not come from good, but it appears that way. But it's not true. Can evil people do good things?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And can it be seen or perceived by others as they're good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you explain that? Why are the evil people doing good?
For
To
ulterior motive.
For ulterior motive, exactly. There's something that is motivating them to do that.
deceive you.
Yeah. Is not coming from a virtue of genuine goodness. Right? So, in other words, you can't conclude that although so-and-so was exposed as a false prophet, okay, there's let's just say there's a televangelist that's very popular, right? Everyone just listens to that person, and they're totally they think that he's the prophet of God, he's sent by God, but then he's exposed, right? He's exposed as a false prophet. It comes to light. And some people would say, well, even though he was exposed as a bad guy, at least he did some good.
Right.
Or at least his ministry brought some good fruit. Is that true?
That's
Not.
a good,
Was that?
that's a good question.
That's a good question. Okay.
Because we see philanthropists, they give money, but they're not interested in God.
Yeah.
And you see that all the time. They say, now that person's a nice person. They don't do anything. They help people. So
Right.
what do you have to say that? But they say, I don't need God to do good. I can just,
Mhm.
It was good in the eyes of the people, but not in the eyes of God, because God can read the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So not according to this principle, because God can read the heart. That's right, Berta. So at least when people make that argument, at least he did some good stuff. It's like saying, well, at least this apple tree yielded some oranges. Not a lot, but some. Does that make sense? Not according to the principle that Jesus sets forth. Good tree will only give good fruit. Evil tree only evil fruit. Okay. Now we're talking about bad prophets. Let's now go to the other side, the good prophets. It's same with good prophets and their good ministry. Good prophets, if you see in the Bible, were always accused of doing evil.
Mm.
Okay. Like one apparent example, Elijah, right? Elijah, when he encounters King Ahab calls him what? You troubler of Israel. Right? And that was far from the truth. Right? Who was really the troubler of Israel? It was King Ahab, but he was calling and accusing Elijah of being the troubler of Israel. So good prophets are being discredited for the good they're doing, or the good that they're doing is being evil spoken of. Right? Even Jesus was accused of being a false prophet, yes or no?
Yes.
Uh-huh. His miracles were attributed to the working of what?
Beelzebub.
Beelzebub, the Lord of all demons, right? Well, he's in league with the demons. That's how he could do all these miracles, right? Was Jesus a true prophet or false prophet?
True.
He's
True.
true, right? But yet, what are they doing? They're turning everything that Jesus does as bad. You see that?
Yes.
So how do you really know someone for who they are? And when it comes, when it comes down to it, Jesus is saying, by their fruits, you will know them. By the way, in order for fruits to appear, does it happen quickly or does it take time?
Time.
Takes time.
It takes time.
Oh,
It takes time. What are you thinking, Vic?
I left the water on.
Oh no. Okay. Oh no, 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 no. All right. We'll say a little prayer for you. But
Yeah, it takes time. It takes time to get nourished and to develop
right.
to make good fruit.
Yes. But also, you know who that person really is when the circumstances bring it out.
Mhm.
You see the person for who they really are. The true character, when things get tough, when facing difficult situations or challenges in life, how they react to the adversity, the stress, the insults, the suffering. If they're pretending, that facade will melt away quickly.
Mhm.
If it's genuine, you cannot help but acknowledge, just like the centurion on the cross, the centurion at the cross, when he saw Jesus die, what did he declare at the very end? He said, surely
This is the Son of God.
this man was the Son of God. Exactly. Jesus went through tremendous suffering, yet his character was undeniably who he was till his last dying breath. That's why, in the same way, his followers that died after him left the same impressionable witness sealed with their blood, and their fruits were seen and evident by all from their spilled blood. And it's interesting, as we're talking about fruits, and they died, and their fruits were shown when they died, their blood became seed for the Christian church. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus warns about false Christs and false prophets, which will persecute God's people. My question to you is this: what will expose the false Christ and false prophets for who they are? What will expose them? What will expose them as false and proving God's people being faithful and true?
They will speak
Um,
against his word. False prophets will speak against God's word.
It won't
saying-
speak according to the testimonies and to the Bible.
Yeah, to the scriptures.
Right.
Okay. Yes, that's true.
Are you talking about the end or are you talking about as we're going along?
As we're going along till the end. So what's going to expose those false prophets and false Christs is by our fruits in the time of trouble.
Right.
Our fruits, as we endure those things, as Christ endured his suffering on the cross, as we endure those things and people see that we're enduring those things patiently, and with a Holy Spirit peace, they will see who is really true and who is really false.
Right.
It's going to come down to that. Question is, are we ready for that?
No.
We have a long way to go, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
So take a look. Verse 19 of the 19 of Matthew 7. Matthew 7:19. Back to the original one. We'll come back to Matthew 3. But Matthew 7:19. What will happen to trees that do not yield good fruit?
They're cut down and thrown into the fire.
Okay, yes. So every tree that bringeth not good fruit is cut down and cast into the fire. So what two things are happening to them? Those such trees?
They're cut down first,
cut down first, and
then they're burned up.
okay. So let me ask you this: what's the purpose of cutting down?
That they don't grow and spread the,
Yeah, so they don't come back.
So they don't come back. So in other words, to put a stop to producing evil fruit.
right,
And also because they don't, and for the other ones that don't produce fruit, they are useless, fruitless, like the cursed fig tree. Remember the cursed fig tree? Jesus
yes,
spoke a parable about that, the parable of the fig tree that did not produce fruit. They're supposed to cut it down, right?
right,
So if they're not producing fruit, cut it down. If they're producing evil fruit, cut it down. Put a stop to that, right? So what's the purpose of casting it into the fire?
well, for it to be the basis of good tree.
Mhm. Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you burn a tree, it goes into ashes, right? So the ashes then will grow, will nutriate the
Okay,
soil, and
I
then it'll,
see.
it'll produce a fruitful tree.
I see. So the only good for that tree now is to just be recycled with the minerals or something. Okay, well, the purpose of
No
cat
more deception, no more deception. The tree can't come back and deceive once it's burned and there's nothing left.
there's nothing left.
Okay.
So the purpose of casting into the fire is annihilation,
So like a cleansing.
total obliteration.
Mm.
So get this, cutting down and casting into the fire, talking about cutting down, cutting off, and annihilating completely. This is judgment language.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes.
And this is what John the Baptist alluded to in Matthew chapter 3, verse 10. Okay. Now we're going to get to Matthew chapter 3, verse 10, John the Baptist. Now this is the one that's John the Baptist speaking. Okay. What does John the Baptist say? He's speaking to the Pharisees that came to his baptism, and he exposes them, right? But Matthew chapter 3, verse 10, what does he say?
The axe is laid at the root of the trees, getting ready to be cut down.
Okay.
Yes.
Continue.
And thrown in the fire.
Okay.
But it
Yeah.
does good fruit.
So therefore, every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Again, Jesus says it. John the Baptist says it, right? So in other words, this is talking about judgment language, right? Take a look at Jeremiah 32, verse 19. Someone read that for us. Jeremiah 32, verse 19. We're talking about fruit, trees being cut down, cast to the fire. We understand it to be judgment language. Jeremiah 32, verse 19. What does this say in regards to judgment? And interestingly enough, it mentions fruit tied into judgment.
Great in counsel and mighty in work, for thine eyes are open upon all the ways of the sons of men, to get everyone according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doing.
So based on that, what is fruit also? We learned that fruit is words, right? What they say.
Works.
Works. Exactly. So fruit is both their words and their works. That determines who they really are.
Right.
So we got, hey guys, we got two bases on which we can clearly identify whether or not someone is a good tree or bad tree. Right? By their fruits, you will know them. What are their fruits? The Bible tells us their words, what they speak, and also their works. And doesn't Jesus say in Revelation chapter 22, verse 12, the last chapter of the Bible, it's It's a haunting reminder. I shouldn't say haunting, but it's a reminder, a serious, sombering reminder, where it says, "And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according to" what? His work shall be. So Jesus is coming. His purpose was coming, yes, to take us home, but what does he base that on? It's to see what our works have been. That determines what we receive. Right? And so the end of Matthew chapter 7, the parable of the two trees, verse 20, it says, "Wherefore by their" what? How will you know them?
By their fruits.
By their fruits. Okay, now that word "wherefore" is conclusion. Jesus is giving a conclusion at the end of this discourse about the two trees. Wherefore, in conclusion, by their fruits you shall know them. Any thoughts?
It's a good guideline to see who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. I didn't really see how clear this was until I actually delved into this deeper. Right? Jesus makes it very clear how we can identify them. And if they're faking it, eventually they're going to be exposed. It's like if you're not doing something that's natural and you're just acting, putting on a front, it's like you're holding your breath. And how long can you hold your breath? Eventually you're going to exhale. Eventually you're going to be exposed for who you really are. Right? If you're trying to pretend that you're something you're not, like trying to do that for a long time, it's like holding your breath. Eventually you're going to show your true colors. Fruit takes time to see, right? So what kind of fruit does God want us to have?
Good fruit.
Okay, so what is good fruit?
Good fruit is produced by following his commandments and what's in the scriptures.
Okay. How do you know that? Where do you get that from?
Well, if you love God, you keep his commandments.
Okay. So you're basing it on the works. The works is what determines that. Okay.
And also too, it says to watch out what words you say, because they're very powerful. And it could lead them astray.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
Another thought?
well, and also the fruits of the Spirit in
Right.
Galatians 5:22 and 20.
Galatians, yes, the fruit of the Spirit. Very good. That's apparent, right? That's very clear. That's the kind of fruits that God wants us to manifest. And
Oh, yes.
and also Colossians chapter 1, verse 10. You guys could write this down. You don't have to look it up. But it says this, that you might walk worthy of the Lord in all pleasing, being what? Fruitful in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. So in other words, this is what we're supposed to be fruitful in. Fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. The more we know God, the more we're going to be fruitful in our work. The more we're going to be walking worthy unto God.
What? Where's that again? Colossians what?
Colossians chapter 1, verse 10.
Okay.
So how many of you guys want to produce good fruit?
I do.
Yeah. Yes.
I hope we do.
I hope we do. Yes. So how are we to produce this fruit? We read about the fruit. We identified the fruit of the Spirit. We identified fruits as every good work, being fruitful in every good work and stuff like that. But how do we produce this fruit?
Only by having a relationship with God.
Okay, where do you get that from the Bible? I mean, that sounds good, but where in the Bible does it say that? Back everything you can up with the Bible. Okay, not that I'm disagreeing with the answers, but it's really good to have biblical backing because it is not you saying it, it's the word of God saying it.
I don't know what the verse is, but it says, without God or without faith, it is impossible to please God.
Okay. Yes, faith. But let's find something. Can we think of something that is connected to fruit? Since we're talking about fruit, in the context of fruit, producing fruit, this language is all apparent through the Bible. Is there another place that tells us how we are to produce this fruit? And I'll just give it to you guys.
Through the vine.
Yes.
So
Berta.
the vineyard, right?
And the branches.
Yes, John chapter 15, verse 4. Right? Jesus says, abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can you, except you abide in me. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purges it, that it may bring forth more fruit. And it says here, now you are clean through the word which I've spoken unto you. So in other words, based on what Jesus is saying here, what is the source of our fruit production?
Jesus.
He is.
The vine.
Jesus is.
Jesus is the
Okay,
vine.
you're saying Jesus, but I want something more specific.
The vine.
Okay, you're saying vine, but you're not being as specific.
Is it grape?
What determines our fruit production?
If we're grafted in to the vine.
It doesn't say grafted. You're putting language in there that's not there.
If we're connected to the
If we're
vine.
connected to him, exactly. Okay. We must be connected to him. We must abide in him. Right? A branch is an extension from the vine. Right? And unless we are connected to him, there's no way we can produce fruit. It's all based on our connection with Jesus through his word. His word is cleaning and pruning our character so that we can produce more fruit. And this needs to be a way of life. This determines whether or not we will be a good tree or corrupt tree. Notice in what Jesus says here. He says that there are some people that, although they are connected to him, they don't bear fruit. Now that's very interesting. Did you see that? Verse 2. Every branch in me, he says, abide in me, right? And I in you. And in verse 2 of chapter 15, it says, every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purges it, that it may bring forth more fruit. So we must not fool ourselves into thinking, hey, I'm in the church. I'm connected. But you have no fruit. You don't have a true vital connection with Jesus. And that, my friends, can be to our detriment at the end. Although we're in the church, although we are in the faith, and praise God that we are we producing fruit? And how do you know that? The circumstances around you determine that. The stressful situations, the trials in life, when circumstances don't go your way, in those moments it shows whether or not you have the fruit manifested in those moments. And if you don't have, that could be because in those moments you have separated yourself from Christ in the way that Peter did when he was walking on water. As long as he was keeping his eyes on Jesus, he was walking above that water. When he turned his eyes away as he was being distracted by the storms, the wind, the waves, that's when he plunged in. That's the same for us too. So we must have that vital connection and know that we're connected in order for us to bear fruits in those moments, to see whether or not we are. And those moments tell us whether or not we're connected with him or not.
Yeah, because when you said like that, even if you come to church, you still that still doesn't mean that you're connected.
That's
But
right.
even demons even demonic people came to church, to the
Mhm.
synagogue, and it
That's
wasn't
right.
until they were connected to God, that to Jesus, that they were allowed him to cast out those
Mhm.
demonic spirits.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, any other thoughts before we wrap up? We have a few minutes. Was this deep?
Yes.
It was deep? Okay. Was it too deep?
So
No.
let me ask you this. So you say it determines on the circumstances that you're in, whether you're in Jesus or not.
No, the circumstances determine whether you have the fruit or not.
But don't you go through trials and tribulations, and with that you're supposed to be actually joyful in the tribulations,
Mm-hmm.
for
But
it shall bring fruit, right?
what if you're not joyful? See, that's what I'm
Oh,
saying. You know, there's. You're right. We should be joyful, but there are times where we don't feel like we get swallowed up in those things, right? We get swallowed up in those things. It's like a we're caught in the whirlpool, and we're just like, oh man, what's happening here, and you're just like losing it, and you losing it is showing that you have momentarily not clung to Christ, and the fact that that it is evident during those moments shows that you still have yet to manifest some fruits, because you are not vitally connected to Christ. Because if you're vitally connected to him and those circumstances come, you should be able to withstand those things. Your character should rise above those things rather than being swept away by those things. And so that's both good and bad. It's good in the sense that it shows you where you still need to grow. But it's also bad because it's also it's something that we need to overcome. And how are we going to overcome it? We can only overcome it through Christ. And that means we have to trust in him in order for that to happen. And so, does that make sense, Vic?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Do you think that that the people in the church have a part to play in that when someone is being tried, their faith is being tried? Or do you
Absolutely.
think these, okay, I was gonna say,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. And I think those church members will be held accountable. Just
Okay.
like Job's friends. Remember Job's friends?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were telling Job, oh, you did all these bad things and stuff, right? And they're making Job more discouraged. And at the end, what did God say to Job's friends? You did not speak what was right to my servant Job.
Mm-hmm.
He rebuked them for what they said. And he held them accountable for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah, for sure. I think church members, like what we do and what we say when someone's going through trial, we better be very careful how we respond to that, or how we say things in those moments, right? So we have to be very careful. And be gracious
And supportive.
and supportive. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Very good point to bring up. That was good. That was good. All right, guys. Man, this was a good study. We're glad that all of you guys joined us. The usual people are kind of quiet and usually talk in the past, but hey, we're glad you're here. I see Marcia's here. Marcia Spencer's here. Parita's back. Zoom user, guest, Jacqueline, Elnora, Verda, Vic, Sharon, and Debbie. And of course, our co-hosts, Jeff and Kristen. We're glad that you're here. And that concludes our study for today. We're going to go
Oh.
ahead and yes, is there another comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so when are we planning for that trip?
The trip. Which trip are you talking about?
We're supposed to go to the
Holy
Bible
Land.
Land,
To the Holy
Holy Land,
Land?
Bible Land?
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah, when the
Europe or
war is
something.
over.
when the
Well, we can go another direction. We can go
Yeah,
to-
yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that every time. Thanks for bringing that up. Let's talk about that. Maybe we could plan it out. I have looked at some websites that do offer those tours. Yeah, but it's pricey, guys. I have to warn you, it's pricey. We're talking about like but it's a whole package deal. It's like, airfare plus hotel and meals during the whole stay there. I think it's like a week or 2 week stay.
Mhm.
Sometimes they do it for a week. It depends like whatever time is. Sometimes it may be two weeks may be too much for some people. But it's like about like 2,000, 3,000 per person.
Round trip?
Yeah, round trip.
No, that's not bad.
Yeah. That includes everything. So I don't know what your budget is like, but that's something that we can definitely plan for.
It depends where you're going.
Yeah.
That's true too. That's true too.
Where I went, we paid 5,000
5,000 for yours. How long was your trip?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, so 2 weeks is a little bit more. Yeah.
No, when I went to the Holy Land, it was 3 weeks and it was
The flights.
close to 5,000.
Yeah. So it is pricey, but it is.
It was
It's
worth it.
it's a bucket list event. You want to, if you can get a chance to do it, do it. It's just phenomenal, the whole experience.
Mhm.
But yeah, maybe in 2 years' time we could plan for that. Maybe 2006.
If the Lord don't come.
Yeah, if the Lord doesn't come. That's right. Okay, well, thank you guys for participating, and I hope that this was beneficial to you.
I had some confusion about we started with bad trees and good trees. And then we ended with being connected to the
Mhm.
vine.
That's right.
So if you're a good tree, if you're a bad tree and you're connected to the vine, does that change you?
I would say so.
Oh, but we had a principle that if you're bad, you're always bad.
Very good, Elnora. Very good.
That's why I'm kind of, it's almost like that's where my
Now, let's just take the context in consideration. Who was Jesus talking about?
The Pharisees?
Well, no, not the Pharisees. That's from other texts. But in Matthew 7, who was he talking about directly connected to when he's talking about good tree, bad tree?
False prophets.
False prophets.
False prophets, yeah.
Okay, false prophets. False prophets that are intent on doing their own way of destruction. Right? Like, for example, one false prophet comes to mind, Balaam. Remember Balaam?
Yep.
Right? Balaam was set out to curse Israel for profit, for gain. right? And God tried to stop him, right? God tried to kill him, right? But in the mercy, the donkey saved him, and the donkey spoke to him. I think God was behind that. And so Balaam had a chance after that encounter with the angel. He had a chance to change, yes or no?
Yes,
He had a chance to change his direction, yes or no?
yes.
Yes,
But did he change his direction?
No.
no,
No, he continued to set out to do what he wanted to do. And that's characteristic of such false prophets that are bad trees that produce evil fruit. Right? God has tried to reach them, but they're set on doing what they want to do regardless. To such is the perfect description of a bad tree producing evil fruit, because their evil fruit is representative of their works. They're set on doing wrong against God. Bad works. Do you understand,
Yes.
Elnora? Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Yes. So just keep that in mind. There's still hope for all of us, right? So may we continue to stay connected to the vine, Christ Jesus. That's my prayer.